Is France against South Africa the biggest match of 2025? I think you can certainly make a case. And let me make the case on the video. Let me know your thoughts in the chat down below. I'm currently at Copenhagen Airport. Hopefully you can hear me all right. There's a lot of bustle going on around me, but I managed to steal a little corner to get very excited about this weekend, round 2 of the November Test matches, and one of the games I have been looking forward to since the moment it was announced, because we have had to wait a full just over 2 years for the rematch of that absolutely epic quarter-final in Paris. One of, if not the greatest game I've ever watched. One of the most memorable games of the modern era. One of the finest test matches, one of the best adverts for rugby. I don't think it's possible to overhype how good that game was, but I guess what I'm doing now looking forward is wondering if it's possible to overhype this game coming up. As I say, let me know what you think. Subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up. So the case for it being the biggest game of 2025, you have got the Six Nations champions against the Rugby Championship champions. And that's pretty cool. The best of the North against the best of the South. And also, I would say, and here's another reason why you could make the argument that this is the biggest game of the year. Maybe the biggest game since the Rugby World Cup. I'll come on to other ones and the reasons why that may not be the case. But I think one thing I do think this is a prime example of the value of scarcity, which I don't think rugby emphasises nearly enough. Rugby seems to me to have fallen into a trap in recent years of thinking we need to make more money, therefore we need to have more games. And sometimes less is more. And when you look at the biggest sports in the world, NFL for example, I've just flown into Copenhagen from Chicago. Chicago Bears had a game on Sunday that they only have, 9 home games a year? Unless they reach the playoffs, then they might get 1 or 2 more, and yet it's the biggest sport on the planet. Less is more sometimes. And when I look at this game between France and South Africa, I think it's a prime case of scarcity has a massive value. You don't always need to just play more games to get more money. And well, I'll tell you what, look at Rassi Erasmus's Twitter account if you want to see what I'm talking about. That's his Twitter account. He follows one account, and that account, France. Classic Rassi, right. Absolutely brilliant. And I just wonder if he thinks this is the biggest game of the year, or maybe he's just focused on the next biggest game, the next game that there is for France, for South Africa against France. It's definitely massive, because I also think, and I've been talking about this in terms of being a final part of a trilogy, because you had the Rugby World Cup quarter-final in 2023, but prior to that in 2022, you had that absolutely brutal game in Marseille, which was just rugby from the gods again. And I'm really hoping this is going to be a fitting finale to an amazing trilogy of games. Now, obviously, what you can come back and say in terms of the biggest game of 2025 was, well, no, it's going to be the game between New Zealand and South Africa, that one at Eden Park, and the greatest rivalry, as they're dubbing it now. Definitely New Zealand, South Africa, the 2 most successful teams, the 2 most historic teams in Rugby World Cup history. 2 fanatical fan bases, 2 amazing teams. But here's the thing, and on my point about scarcity has a value, New Zealand and South Africa are going to play 4 times next year. They played twice this year, twice last year, 3 times the year before that, was it? Maybe even more than that. I can't remember exactly how many it was, but I have looked at the numbers, and by the end of next year, by the end of 2026, New Zealand and South Africa will have played each other 15 times in 6 years. 15 times in 6 years. Whereas, by the time this game finishes on Saturday, we've had to wait 2 years since the Rugby World Cup quarter-final. We've had all that anticipation built, and in the same amount of time that New Zealand and South Africa will have played 15 times, South Africa and France will have played 5 times. and scarcity has a value. Now, the Eden Park test was a bit different. It felt like a total one-off. Actually, I think, and certainly from the comments on the channel from South African and New Zealand fans, it felt like the Rugby Championship was kind of irrelevant in terms of that game. It was because of the 31-year record. It was, certainly from South Africa's perspective, it was one other accolade that they wanted. They wanted to be world champions, back-to-back world champions, back-to-back Rugby Championship champions for the first time. But that was all kind of, the Rugby Championship part was secondary to taking down that 31-year record against the ABs, which did hype that up game a little bit more. I can see the argument that that is the biggest game of 2025, but this is absolutely right up there. And let's just ramp up the anticipation for this weekend. I've had so many comments from people who are travelling from South Africa or from around Europe to Paris for this match, recognising just what a big game it is. And I am absolutely buzzing that I'm going to be there in the stadium. Kind of doing a bit of a military precision, just like flying in for the game and then straight out again. I want to be part of it. I was in France for the Rugby World Cup 2023, but I was down in Marseille for the other quarterfinals, and also I was watching the South Africa v France game down in Marseille, wishing I was in Paris. And I remember watching the game in Marseille when I was at home and just thinking, I wish I was in Marseille that day. Weirdly, I was in Marseille when I wanted to be in Paris, and I was back at home when I wanted to be in Marseille. This time I want to be in Paris, and I'm going to be in Paris. And I don't think it's possible to hype this game up. In terms of this matchup, just the narratives, let's build some of the narratives, because ultimately sport is storytelling for me. Sport is storytelling, and the stories of this game, you have got Pieter-Steph du Toit, the greatest forward that I've ever seen. I think the greatest South African player of all time. And ordinarily, and in previous games, he was up against the greatest back I've ever seen in Antoine Dupont, who I think is already the greatest French player of all time and will be regarded as one of the greats. Yeah, I'm one of the greats. Let's not start an argument. I'm not going down the whole blooming goat rabbit hole, but he will be regarded as one of the greats by the end of his career. Unfortunately, we've been robbed of him from this particular contest, and that is one of the other narratives, unfortunately, which is going to sort of pierce the bubble of hype a little bit, because you have got quite a lot of players for France who are not available. Piato Malvaca, Uini Antonio, Francois Cross, Yoram Moefana. Big players, Cyril Bay. You've getting on for a third to a half of a French team that are not going to be there. And on top of that, there are other big name players who are just not playing very well by their very high standards. Gregory Aldrit has not been at Aldrit levels. Ntamak has been starting to get back to, but is not at Ntamak levels. The centre issue is a big one without Moefana. How do they solve that one? Barassi and Fiku are both really good players, but haven't played loads at international level, and you compare that to Creel and Dialende, who've played loads together. You do, though, on the positive side, no Malvaca, but Marchand is very good. On the positive side, you have got, in a bunch of positions, two of the best in the world going head-to-head. Louis Bielbiere opposite Cheslin Colby. That is worth the ticket price on its own. They are incredible. But then you chuck in Arensa and Penno, and that's an amazing matchup as well. Will Willems will be back, in which case him against Ramos is absolutely class. Sasha FM, my favourite radio station, up against Ntamak is absolutely brilliant. Aldrit Visa, Boudehont trying to go toe-to-toe with Pieter-Steph du Toit, a young man, 25-year-old Boudehont, big bosher of a guy, going up against the great PSDT, who gives his opponents PTSD. No Oxenche as well, I guess, from South Africa, just to balance things up a little bit. Also, tactically, when I look at this game, I think you've got two of the most kind of dashing, daring, brilliant attacking fly halves on their day in Ntamak and Sasha FM, assuming those are the guys that actually play together. You have got Miafu up against Etzebeth, two of the biggest brutes, enforcers in World Rugby as well. Tactically, have France learnt their lesson from 2 years ago with the aerial game? It's something that they've been developing in their young players. They recognise they've got a deficiency there. France try and kick long. They don't want to kick to compete. They want to play on the transitions, but that's what's interesting. South Africa now play really well in counter-attack and transitions. South Africa's forwards are brilliant at offloading and handling in a way that it's kind of been a French DNA typically, and France have started to get these big boshes like Miafu, like Jean-Baptiste Gros, started to get Malvaca and Marchand, started to get these guys, and Aldrit just carrying hard into contact. Him versus Visa is going to be awesome. So France have added a little bit of kind of South Africa to them, and South Africa have added quite a bit of France, classic France, to their repertoire as well. France's young players like Atisogbe, who's another one not available, and Buros, another one not available. They are both absolutely brilliant aerially, and a lot of France's young players coming through are. But the guys like Ramos, Penaud, Bielbiere, not so good, and I think France could get exposed there. I also think France's players just aren't in as good a form, and it is a reality we have to acknowledge. France are playing their first game with their full squad together for the first time since March. So over 7 months since they last played as a proper French first team, and they're playing against the South Africa side that have played 9 times in the last couple of months, and I think that will make the difference in the end. Unfortunately, I'm going to predict at this stage, before the teams are out, and I may change my mind as we get closer, so I'll have more previews, but at this long range view, my thought is that it will be a great game and a great occasion, but it may not be the total 50-50 coin flip that the last 2 games have been in 2022 and 2023 because of those factors, but we will see, and I absolutely cannot wait, and I just know this is going to be rugby for the gods. For the record, actually, if I was guessing what the teams would be and picking a combined team, oh sorry, that's Rassi again, there we go. If I were picking a combined team and guessing who's going to be playing, it's just total guess at this stage obviously, but if I were picking a combined team, that's what I would go with. 10 South Africans and 5 Frenchmen. Aldrit's not in great form, Malvaca's not there, Miafu's not in great form, and Tamak's not in great form. So yeah, just 3 French backs, 2 French forwards. If everyone was fit and firing and in form and had played together for a while, I think you could make a strong case that it would look like that, with more 50-50, more toss-ups. If Malvaca was available, you could coin flip with Malcolm Marx. If Aldrit was fit and firing, you could argue he is above Visa, and the same goes for Cross over Khaleesi, Dupont over and Ntamak as a pair are absolutely incredible together. So I don't know if it's going to be the best of France. I hope it is, but I'm looking forward to seeing it. And just a reminder, I have a live show coming up in Cardiff at the end of the month. I'll be there for Wales against South Africa in the Principality Stadium, listening to that Welsh male voice choir belt out the Welsh national anthem in Cardiff is one of the great sights in rugby, and they're going to be welcoming the world champions to town. And to build up to that game, I've got a live show at the Walkabout, just a stone's throw from the stadium, which will get underway at 11 o'clock on the day, so you can come along, have a breakfast, have a couple of drinks. I've got some special guests lined up, which I'm looking forward to you coming and enjoying. And I would love to see you there. And while the availability lasts, there are some, possibly, if you're lucky, if you're getting quick, some discounted tickets with the code SASHAFM. That's SASHAFM at checkout. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you there. And I look forward to covering the game on Saturday, which should be an absolute banger.